HVAC people.
All right, so I'm finna take the little different video today. I'm finna take the bike out and go on a little 20-mile ride. And my little Bridgestone 1984. But finna take the ride out. Like I say, this is not a traditional video, but I do kind of want to change the narrative in HVAC because we kind of known to where. But let me tell you this story. I was with a guy. He was a fellow technician of mine, co-worker, and the service manager was telling him that he didn't want him smoking in the van. So the dude, after he got through talking with the service manager, you know, he get with me. He was riding with me, or I was riding with him, whichever. But he was like, we had a new service manager at the time. So the guy was like, man, shoot, he talking about we can't smoke, man. He just don't know, man. We construction workers, you know, we smoke. That's what, you know, that's what we do. I don't know what he thinking, you know, like we office workers or something. So, like some business owners or some managers, you know, don't want you smoking. You know, they don't want you going in the customer house or the customer facility, you know, smelling like smoke. So basically, I want to change the narrative, and this don't really have anything to do with smoking, but it's about our health. We want to change the narrative about health. Sure enough, we construction workers, electricians. You know, we don't want to be known to have the plumber's crack. We want to be presentable. You know, we want to try to be in the best shape of our lives. You know, we don't want to be overweight when we don't have to. I see guys got to sit Indian style, or they got to lay down when they troubleshooting the condenser unit, or they in the attic, got to lay on their side to try to troubleshoot. And it get real hot in the attics, in these spaces. And if you're up there by yourself, even a person that's in good shape is dangerous. So we need to drink a lot of water. We need to, you know, either walk or run or ride a bike like I'm fit to do, you know, in our spare time, you know, so we can kind of change the narrative. We want to, you know, be presentable, because when you're in good shape, you can think better. It's mental too. You can think with clarity. You can troubleshoot with clarity. You can make the right decision. It's better for safety, you know. So I encourage, you know, anybody. I want to motivate people to, you know, change the narrative. Let's be in the best shape of our lives out here. Let's look good. So I'm gonna go on a 20-mile ride. I like to listen to audio books, so I'm gonna have my Bluetooth headphones on, and I want to do like a voiceover or audio tracks on what I like to listen to. So I like to listen to like motivational speakers, or I think on this ride I might listen to a little Ray Lewis or Earl Nightingale. Like say it's gonna be about an hour ride. Depends on at least an hour. It'll take me about, you know, with traffic, for 20 miles, probably gonna take me about an hour the route that I'm going. You know, if I take it easy, it could be an hour and a half. So I can listen to a lot of, you know, good inspirational stuff. So sometimes I listen to different audio books, anything about the trade. So if y'all want to suggest anything like HVAC business podcasts that y'all like to listen to, or any business podcast, I'm more like the business minded now. To me, I got enough technician skill. I got enough tools. I know a lot of people, you know, advise tools, but I'm more about the business side of it now. So I like to listen anything about business, you know, tax season, anything about taxes. But I think I'm maybe a little Earl Nightingale. So instead of, you'll see the view. And like I say, this video not gonna be probably for everybody, but you just wanna look at a nice view and listen to a good audio book. And what I'm listening to, I'm gonna do like a good little voiceover of what I'm playing. And you kind of like just see the scenery, you know. You might be working out or something, because once I finish the hour ride, 20-mile ride, and then I hit the weights. So, like I said, I hope you enjoy. I know there's something different, but I will be making these videos every now and then. 'Cause I know there's gonna be some people commenting like, oh man, just stick with the HVAC videos. Hey, I got over 500 some videos on this channel, so you can more than definitely go and watch some troubleshooting if you want to, but I want to kind of, you know, change the narrative. You know, this, like I said, it's my channel. I get to post what I want. Anyway, y'all stay in shape.
Thank you guys for having me. I've been here for a couple of days and I've met some awesome people. And I think my message is always simple. Whatever you want to go do it. Nobody determines that but you. See, when, how old are you? 14, what's your name? 12? I got a son, 14. Great job. But when I was your guys' age, I figured something out. And it's no secret what I figured out. But whatever majority of people was doing, I found myself doing the opposite of what they was doing. Because I wanted to chase something greater. I wanted to do something for my mom. I wanted to get my mom away from certain things. I wanted to get my mom and my sisters and my brothers away from certain just situations and circumstances. For me growing up, I trusted her. A meal, to have a hot meal once a week was a blessing for me if I had one meal. My mom couldn't feed me every day. So I figured it out in my mind that the only thing that could pull me away from any of that thinking was hard work. That's it. Because I think the easiest thing to do, now I know you guys come in here because y'all got beautiful coaches and y'all got great people who want to work with you. But the easiest thing to do is come in here and let coach say, do this, do that, do this, and shoot the ball this many times, do that. Yeah. And it's the same thing I tell my kids. That's the easiest thing to do. You know what the hardest thing to do is? Is to do it when nobody ain't watching. What do you do when you go home? How much time do you spend with that basketball when you're by yourself? Yeah. It's all right, but I'm just telling you that we have to, and I tell my kids this all the time, you have to figure out at a very young age what you want to do. And when you figure out what you want to do, go do it. But every day, you can't take no breaks. Since I was 9 years old, I took 2 breaks in my life. The breaks I took was some breaks that I had surgeries. That was the only breaks I've ever took. So for 27 years, I haven't took a break. I just came out the weight room this morning. I'm going back in the weight room again this evening. I work out over 5 times a day. For one simple reason. I don't like where I once was. I didn't like where I once was. So I promised myself, I promised my mom, I promised my sisters, I promised my city that I won't be back there. So when I walk in this gym, when I walk in that little ring over there and saw that ring, that's where I remember. That's where I grind it from. That's all I know. All I know is grind. And I'm looking at each one of y'all eyes right now, and it's grinding, each one of y'all. But now each one of y'all got to find out who's going to become the leader. Who's going to take that next step to tell somebody, man, let's shoot 500 times a day. If Coach got us shooting 100 times a day, let me shoot 500. I tell my son, if you want to play basketball, you want me to pay for you to play basketball, you got to shoot over 1,000 times a day. If you good in your right hand, and your right hand is the only thing you know how to use, put it behind your back, lock it with a belt, and use it every time you come in the gym. Dribble with your left hand. Make your left think like your right. That's what basketball is, what you're trying to do. And whatever you're trying to do, man, schoolwork, trust me, it's the number one thing when you talk about education. When you talk about life, when you talk about understanding where you really want to go, if you ain't bringing home straight A's and B's, and nowadays you got to think, now y'all kids nowadays, y'all got a little better than what we had. Because we had to go in the real hard books, the real books to find information. Now y'all got iPhones, y'all got iPads, y'all got everything. Y'all Google any answer, y'all get any answer y'all want to get. So grades, it should be no reason everybody in this room should hold each other accountable to have straight A's or A's and B's. I tell my children, you can get anything you want from me if you bring me home straight A's and B's. Because that means you dialed in. That means you made up your mind to do something. But then there's a balance there. Because we're three-part beings. Mind, body, spirit. We're three-part beings. Mind, body, spirit. Take this with you the rest of your life. Don't wake up without prayer. Don't wake up without thanking God that I'm awesome. Because I promise you, none of us had control over that. Your mama didn't wake you up this morning, your daddy didn't wake you up this morning. It's only one person that woke us all up this morning. And I ain't talking about religion, I'm talking about a different power. So once you understand what your prayer life should be, then you got to understand what your physical life should be. I don't get out of bed in the morning without grinding. That's what I'm asking each one of y'all right now. What's the difference in you and the man sitting beside you? Because in my business, 1% makes it. That's it. So out of every child sitting here right now, if everybody had the same dream, one will make it from this whole crowd. Who will be that one? What's the difference of your mindset and everybody else's mindset that's sitting? It's got to be different. It's got to be different. You got to be hungry for it. When you come in this gym, you got to put everything you got on the court. Everything, every second. And when your coach tell you that this, you'll be the first one in line. What you want me to do, coach? If I don't know how to do it, I can figure out how to do it. That's what leaders are born in. Because anybody can come shoot in these gyms that these people have worked countless hours to build these communities for y'all and build up these buildings for you. How much you really gonna use it? I walked out that door right there and I saw a good friend of mine over there. When you talk about Michael Jordan, have y'all ever really read his story? How many people has really read Michael Jordan's story? Raise your hand. Do yourselves a better favor. Every person here, take your time out this week and read Michael Jordan's story. And tell me yourself if that man over there, who is considered the greatest of all time, saw what he had to go through first. He came in the gym just like this, and this coach cut it from the basketball team twice. Twice. Sent him home. He went in the backyard of his house and he mastered the game of basketball. I don't want to tell y'all how many shots he shot. I want you to go read it yourself. I see these iPhones, I see Google it. Pull it up and read it and see what makes him the greatest. Now, if I share my story with you, I can only tell you, I told you before, I don't take breaks. I don't know what break feel like. Because now I got kids coming up after me. And I told my oldest son, the day you think you can beat me in anything, show me. The day you can outrun me, show me. The day you can outlift me, outwork me, outshoot me, whatever you think you can do, show me. And when you get to that point where you can beat that, then go on to the next level. But the real challenge is, who's the next Michael Jordan in this room? Who's the next Ray Lewis? who's the next whoever you want to be, because that's ultimately who you turn out to be. You don't turn out to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Ray Lewis. You turn out to be the next you. But it's called dialing in. 3-part beings, mind, body, spirit. Today is a new day. I'm only here for one reason. I came over here to speak to the London Warriors, and I bumped into some incredible young men that has the same path that I had. Broken homes. I come from a broken home. You understand? I come from domestic violence. I come from a man putting his hands on my mom. I come from that. I didn't start lifting weights because of sports. I started lifting weights because I got tired of a man putting his hands on my mother. So I stepped up as the man in the house. Started doing push-ups and sit-ups every night of my life. Took a deck of cards and I flipped it. 9, 5, 8, Jack, Queen, and King, I do 10, Ace, I do 25, Jokers, I do 50. And I did that for about 3, 4, 5 years until I built my body up. And all I would do is wear big shirts until I built my body up. Till one day when it hit my mom, I was strong enough to help her out. So sports was a scapegoat for me. It was a way out because it taught me complete discipline. It taught me how to really dial in. I didn't have daddy. Daddy wasn't there for me. So I had to ground myself. That's what I'm asking every young kid sitting in this room right now. What makes you grind every day? What really makes you grind every day? When you wake up in the morning, are you really pissed off? I am. I stay pissed off. Because I'm always chasing something else. I ain't done nothing. I ain't done nothing yet. Because whatever New Year's coming up in 30 plus days when we get back there, that's a whole new year for me. I've been in the NFL for 17 years. I've been doing what I've been doing for 27 years, but I've been in the National Football League for 17 years. Grinding. And every year for me is a new year. So year 1 through 16, I will close that chapter. It's over. Wow. Year 17, I done heard everything. I done heard I done lost a step. I done heard I done got old. I done heard it all. But I guarantee you, the person that I'm competing against come Monday night, they won't see it. Because I work too hard. Every man sitting in this room got the same thing I got. It's just what you do with it every day. It's what when you wake up in the morning, do you pray to that man upstairs? Do you actually look up and say, thank you? Do we even recognize what sunsets and sunrises we gotta start being kids again to where you don't get tired. You don't know what being tired is. That's what I got inside of me. That's why I can never get tired. Because I got something burning inside of me. Kid, all over again. I can't get tired. We can't take breaks. We gotta help mama out. Somebody here gotta help mama out. Somebody gotta help daddy out. Somebody. And if you gotta do it, then that means you gotta put all the games away for it. You gotta put in your work first. You gotta dribble that ball 500 times with whatever hand you weak at. You gotta go to the basket with the opposite hand. Whatever hand you strong at, go to the hand with go to the basket with the opposite hand. 500 times a day without the coaches. That's the key. That's the key. Because they're here for you regardless. But I'm asking you to be here for yourself. So man, thank you guys for letting me come in here and mess up y'all workout. I don't want to mess up y'all workout. Because I'm a mean person when somebody mess up my workout. I gotta start all over. But thank you, and like I said, the people that I've met and the things that they are willing to sacrifice for you guys, you won't find a lot of people in this world that's willing to sacrifice that. You just won't. Outside of these doors, it's a real world out there. Stay away from that craziness. All right? Stay away from all of that. Somebody trying to get you to do the wrong thing, run. All right? It's better to run than stay there and find yourself in something that you ain't ready to deal with. But it's time to help mama. It's time to help daddy. And ultimately, it's time to help yourself to make sure you don't waste time. Don't waste time. No matter what you do, don't waste time.
This is Earl Nightingale with the first issue of Direct Line. The purpose of this new program is to explore ideas, the best ideas from the past and present as they pertain to you and me and the mystery of our lives. Ideas about people, why they do the things they do, and why they don't do some of the things they could do. Why they live the way they do, believe the way they do, work and play the way they do. Our most distinguished and eloquent researchers in the field of psychology and psychiatry tell us that our affluent society has not brought us happiness and joy. On the contrary, people in the highly developed, wealthy nations of the world seem to be suffering from a malaise made up of boredom, apathy, and general depression. We know that people are at their best, that is, they seem to be happiest and most energetic, when they're striving toward the fulfillment of what seems to them to be good and worthy ideas. Isn't that true? People move mountains and dance and sing far into the night when they're swept up by a great idea. There's something about the human creature that makes him godlike when he's moved by a great idea, and apathetic, bored, and depressed when he's not. Wherever you find boredom, you'll find the absence of a good idea, in a child or an adult. People are depressed and bored when they know deep down in the very fibers of their being that the life they're living is not what it could be, not what it ought to be. We suffer from an all-pervading feeling of guilt when we're living below our true capacities in our work and in our play. And it's beginning to dawn upon the people everywhere that we've been chasing a mistaken concept of what success is all about. We've confused means with ends. We'll find success, each of us in his own way, when we find ourselves, and when we do, all things that we want and need will be added to our lives. The journey of self-discovery, the journey into meaning, is the most exciting on earth and the most rewarding. When we're gripped by a good idea, a succession of good ideas really, because one leads to another, we're at our best, our happiest. We may not know that we're happy, but we are, and our lives are characterized by a feeling of worth, of purpose. Ideas bring the fresh, clean air of renewal into our lives, into our home lives, into our business lives. The real fun of life is in continually bridging the gap which lies between where we are and where we want to be, and from what we are to what we wish to become. There are three main departments of living with which we should concern ourselves and in which we should succeed. They are, number one, our family lives. Number two, the way we spend our days, on the job and off. And number three, our income. The purpose of this program is to help us find more meaning, more real success in each of these vital departments. First, just a word about listening. You know, when we listen, and especially to information that involves us personally, our minds only pay attention to what we're hearing until something we hear triggers an idea in our minds. Now, at that instant, our minds tune out and concentrate on the new thought. It's like lifting the tone arm on a record player. We no longer hear anything, but the record keeps turning. Now, when you hear something in direct line that sparks an idea, you tune me out for whatever time you devote to the idea. You'll do this repeatedly. The next time you listen, you'll tune out at different times. Because of the way we listen, and because our attention will dart from what we're hearing to what we're thinking about, it's necessary to hear a spoken message several times just to hear it for the first time. And even weeks, months, or years later, it will spark new ideas. So if it's convenient, stop the player whenever you want to think about something you hear. Perhaps you want to make a note of what you've heard, or think about it for some time. Then, when you're ready to resume, start the player again, and so on. If you're driving your car, or if the whole family's listening, that might not be practicable. But even with stops and starts, repeated listening is necessary to make what you hear a part of your way of thinking and doing things. Unfortunately, we don't learn much from something we read only once. If it were printed, it would take time away from other things. In audio form, it can be listened to while we're doing other things, such as commuting to and from work, while traveling on business calls, while dressing, having breakfast, while relaxing after a long day, and so on. Moreover, in this form, it can be heard by all members of the family. If it were only in printed form, it's unlikely that it would be read by more than one, two at most. Another important reason for the cassette tape is that listening is our most effective and effortless way of obtaining information, the most natural way to learn anything. We learned by listening for many years as children before we learned to read. You see, we pluck ideas from speech as we might catch fish from a flowing river. We're not even conscious of the words being used. We listen for ideas, and that's what this program is all about. We learn to read by listening. And for most, reading remains something of a mechanical process from which ideas must be constructed. And finally, the spoken word carries so much more interest and flavor, so much more meaning, and an emotional impact impossible with the printed word. Well, let's begin with this great thought. It has appeared in many forms in man's literature, but I believe it was Emerson who put it best. Nature magically suits the man to his fortunes by making these the fruit of his character. We might experience some difficulty in finding out what we're really like by trying to look inward, but we have only to look about us at our fortunes, for they are the fruit of our character. The late Dr. Maslow, former president of the American Psychological Association, said you judge a person the same way you judge an apple tree, by his fruit, by what he produces. Do you go along with that? It's hard not to, isn't it? Well, what is character? My Random House on a Bridge says character is the aggregate of features and traits that form the apparent individual nature of some person or thing. My Oxford English Dictionary gives as its first definition a distinctive mark, impressed, engraved, or otherwise formed, a brand, a stamp. Any person who has had the chance to live as an adult for any appreciable length of time begins to collect about him what we can call his fortunes. They represent a merciless mirror of him as a person. They reflect his nature and constitute, in total, a distinctive mark, a brand, a stamp. Just as you can tell the name of a fruit tree by examining its fruit, you can tell a great deal about a person in the same way. And we can tell a great deal about ourselves. We surround ourselves in an environment, in circumstances, as Professor Jose Ortega y Gasset used the word, which reflect us, and which include our true beliefs. No matter how loudly we talk about what we believe in, our circumstances reflect our true beliefs. They show to others what is important to us. They reflect our degree of maturity at any given stage of our lives. You see, our fortunes are simply the sum total of what we want and believe we are qualified to receive at any given stage of our lives. For our fortunes should change. They should not just accumulate as we get older, they should change in quality. Change to reflect the changing person. If they do not change, it is an indication that we are not changing. If they do not grow in quality, it's an indication that we are not growing and maturing as persons. Our fortunes are the fruit of our character, and our character changes. Someone once said to Dr. Robert Hutchins when he was Chancellor of the University of Chicago with regard to adult education that you can't teach old dogs new tricks. To which Dr. Hutchins replied, "Human beings are not dogs, and education is not a bag of tricks." We can grow through knowledge with good ideas, and as we grow, our worlds will change to reflect our growth. We outgrow our old selves and shake them off like stiff cocoons no longer big enough to contain us, and that's as it should be. That's the way a person, a family, an organization of any kind should grow. We might say that a person, or an organization, will grow in proportion to two main conditions. The first concerns his degree of receptivity. Are his windows open to the fresh breeze of renewal in the form of new ideas and creative thinking? Many persons, you know, in organizations are closed systems. They've got their windows closed and locked, apparently in the belief that they're already the repository of all useful information. We can all name such persons and such organizations, some quite large, but shrinking. The one thing that always typifies a closed system is that it ultimately begins to shrink, and it will eventually die if it stays closed long enough. Any person or persons making up the management of any sort of organization who feel no need for new ideas, or who do not challenge their own beliefs from time to time, are on the road down toward stagnation and decay. And the second condition governing a person's or organization's growth will be determined by the source or sources of ideas. Now, if our ideas come to us only from those by whom we're habitually surrounded, those who live much as we do, we'll tend to do little more than reiterate and fortify the ideas we already live by. That's also true in an organizational sense. A person can be said to be an organization, indeed a highly complex organization. Like any other sort of organization, the overall success will be determined by the quality of management. Just as the success of any business or other organization depends for its success or failure upon its management, so does the success or failure of a person depend upon the way he manages himself. We're all units of production. We produce things and words and attitudes which reflect our management, and the quality of our product, our total product, will be determined by the quality of our own self-management. Now, we can determine the quality of our overall product by simply assessing what we're being paid for it. It's true for a person, or for a business firm, or any sort of organization. And we might say the quality of our management will be determined by the quality of our ideas. The main ideas of our lives are the main roads on which we travel. So where do we get most of our ideas? When you ask about the extent of a person's education, you must ask, who were his teachers? We need to ask ourselves the same question. We can change, we can grow, and as we change and grow, our fortunes will reflect that change and growth. That our character is the architect of our fortunes is an interesting idea, isn't it? It's so interesting that it could bring about a significant change in our way of living. It could modify or completely change our goals in life. It gives us a way of assessing the quality and the importance of the product we're producing in each of our important divisions. Let's say a company has 3 divisions. 2 are doing well, 1 is losing money. Now, the one that's losing money, provided it's been losing money for some time, would seem to indicate that it has poor management, or else it produces a product or service without sufficient demand on the part of those it would serve. Now, the same can be said to be true of the different departments of our lives. Quite often a person will be great in one department and poor in another. Great on the job at making a living, perhaps, but poor at home, or great at home and poor on the job. Now, I think we can safely say that every relatively normal person wants to succeed in each of the 3 main departments of living. In his family life, in the way he spends his days, that is, the work he's chosen and the way he chooses to spend his free time. It's surprising, how many people tend to forget that they chose their work of their own free will, just as they chose their spouses of their own free will, and the main direction of their lives of their own free will. And we all want to succeed in the income department. That is, we want an income sufficient to fulfill our wants, not just our needs, but our wants as well. Now, we control our rewards in each of these departments. If we've been adults for any real length of time, and if we've achieved any real maturity, we must admit to ourselves that our rewards in each department are commensurate with our management, with our success in interacting with those upon whom our success depends. Now, that's an idea we will accept or reject, depending upon whether our windows are open or closed. I mentioned earlier that we often confuse means with ends. For example, an automobile is a means to an end. It's a means of getting from point A to point B. Money is a means to an end. It's the means to the kind of life we want to live. It represents financial security now and in our later years. It represents good health, education, travel, a good home, and so forth. Now, in our society, these means to ends and others have often been confused with ends. The automobile or money in itself has become an object of veneration, not for what it will do for us to make life more convenient and more pleasurable, but rather for what it is in itself. We tend to worship objects in our society. And finally, we find ourselves in possession of all the objects we ever wanted, and we stand in the middle of them and look at them and come to the realization that they're not enough, not nearly enough. A human being needs more, much more than a pile of objects, important as some of them are. And that's one of the reasons we find so much depression, so much boredom and apathy about us. People have what they wanted. Why aren't they happy? Could it be that they've not moved on to other, larger and more worthwhile goals? I think so. George Bernard Shaw said that it is the first duty of every man not to be poor. I agree with that. Poverty has never brought happiness. We see it staring from the hunger-ravaged faces of the world's underprivileged. We see it in our ghettos. But there are 2 kinds of income, psychic and tangible. Now, psychic income is the income of the mind and feelings, the kind we get when we look at our loved ones or when we've done a good job. Psychic income is the income the firemen get roaring through town with the sirens screaming. It's the income a police officer knows when he straps on his revolver and assumes the authority of his uniform. There's psychic income that comes with a promotion, with the executive suite. It's excitement and satisfaction, and it's perhaps the most important income we receive from our life's work. We can make a living, we can get rich doing many things, but psychic riches come from being in the kind of work we like, doing the things we want to do. Conrad Lorenz, in his excellent book, On Aggression, tells us that the drive to fulfill oneself, to realize if possible the potential of one's unique endowment, is coded in our genetic instructions. And it's going contrary to our genetic instructions that causes us anxiety, guilt. We seem to know that there's a way to live that's better than the one we're settling for. Now, families, schools, society all work to fit us into established pigeonholes, and for some it's fine. For others, the shoe doesn't fit. It hurts. It rubs and chafes and can become agonizingly painful. No psychic income there. So those must seek it off the job in hobbies and avocations, or change the job. But we need to get it somewhere. Psychic income is an important part of our income picture. As to financial income, it should meet our requirements. What those requirements are is a matter of individual taste. Our income should be sufficient for us to live in the style we most enjoy, have the things we think are important, do the things we want to do, see the places we want to see, and perhaps help others who didn't manage or couldn't manage to work it out for themselves. In a society such as ours, it can be said that not every person can find the kind of gainful employment that forms a perfect fit with his aptitudes, likes, and dislikes. Many factors work to hold a person in a particular place and at a particular job other than the amiability of the job itself. But I do believe that almost every thinking, growing, maturing person can find the work he enjoys. And for the rest, the deep sources of satisfaction and interest can come from experiences not connected with their work. For some, their work is the very mainstay of their lives. For others, it's simply the means to an end. Many people are quite content to not work at all. Most retired people enjoy their retirement and wouldn't change things for the world. But for some, active, mind-engaging work is as necessary as food and drink. For many women, running a home, raising their children, caring for their husbands, and 1,001 things necessary to that life are more than enough for all the satisfaction they need. They're quite content with their lives, as they should be. For other women, such a life is unthinkable, the way to madness. They need other interests, other lives. To expect that 50% of the human race should be content with keeping house and raising a family is ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as it would be to expect all men to be lawyers or bricklayers. A woman can want the love and companionship of a man and perhaps a family, without at the same time having an aptitude or even an interest in keeping house. She might prefer to be a brain surgeon, a teacher, a business executive, or any one of the 200,000 possible occupations in our society. We've been taught to live within our means, and it's good advice for a company, a country, or a person. But what are our means? Have we explored our means? Do we know what our real means are? People say a person shouldn't reach beyond his capacity. It'll only end in frustration and disappointment. What is a person's capacity? How's he to find out what it is unless he reaches? The man and wife in a so-called average home on an average street in an average town haven't the faintest notion as a rule that they can sit down at the kitchen table, make a list of everything they want, number the items on the list in the order of their importance to them, and then get everything on that list in 5 years, certainly in 10. An American labor leader once commented that the American people can have anything they want. The trouble is that they don't know what they want, and this most certainly applies to income. A British survey team discovered that the average American family believes that happiness can be guaranteed with a 20% increase in income. It's obvious that most people haven't the foggiest notion as to what constitutes happiness. How does a person increase his income to the point where it more comfortably meets his needs, his present needs, and his savings and investment needs for the future? A good first step is to realize that everything we want, other people have, and will give us if we earn it. $1 from just 10% of the families in the United States would come to $7 million. Our income is in the hands of others. If our income is not what we want it to be, we must examine our product and our management. We have failed to qualify for it, or have lacked the courage and ideas to go after it. Thoreau said, "We have only to move confidently in the direction of our dreams to meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Interesting idea, isn't it? There's an exciting, renewing idea. We have only to move confidently in the direction of our dreams to meet with a success unexpected in common hours. The direction of our dreams is often nothing more than our genetic instructions, than our subconscious, our natural propensities, whatever we want to call it, trying to point us in the right direction. The minute we begin to move in the direction that's right for us, things start going our way. We begin to get lucky, as they say. So we need to ask ourselves, am I moving in the direction of my dreams? Or am I playing lockstep with millions of other people because of some stereotyped idea I picked up from people who don't know any more than I do, maybe less? People who perhaps have not proved in their own lives that they're experts when it comes to living successfully. Eric Hoffer put it pretty well when he said, we're taught not to waste time and raised to waste our lives. Something to think about. So a person, standing back and assessing the three main departments of his life, and understanding that his fortunes are the fruit of his character, gets a pretty good look at himself as manager of himself and whatever else he manages. I think, too, that it's a good idea to reassess our priorities from time to time. What is really important and what isn't? The mature person has this question pretty well straight in his mind. His goals, his needs are his own. They do not necessarily mirror those of the majority of other people. I think we'd be safe to say that with the mature person, his goals and what he considers to be important in his life will not be those held by the majority. The fact that he has goals sets him apart. Recent research into the modern plague of cardiovascular disease, with millions dying of heart disease years before they should, has turned up convincing evidence that we're bringing heart disease upon ourselves because of our lifestyle, our penchant for speed simply for speed's sake, by our impatience at delay, by our headlong rush toward what? Where? Where are we going? What's the hurry? The maturing person agrees with the great Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist Carl Jung, who said, the supreme goal of man is to fulfill himself as a creative, unique individual according to his own innate potentialities and within the limits of reality. And we can do that without a headlong, frenetic charge. You know, when we study golf under a good instructor, we're amazed to learn that an easy, slow, rhythmical swing gets the best results in direction and distance. As my good friend Julius Boros says, swing easy, but hit hard. It's the same in tennis, any sport. It's balance, it's rhythm. My good friend Herb True dropped in the office the other day and said, you know, we Catholics are on the birth control bandwagon too. It's just that we're in the rhythm section. It's good to remember, where our businesses are concerned, where our lives are concerned, it's quality and balance. It's living in balance that counts, that gets the best results, always. We'll live longer and in better health, do better, and enjoy it more. Unless we're doing piecework, it isn't the time we put in, it's the ideas we get and put to work. Everything we see about us that's man-made was once an idea in the mind of one person. Our ideas can be just as good. It takes maturity to realize that, as a rule, happiness and contentment do not come when we reach our goals. We're amazed to find that we were happier, more contented when we were striving toward them. I remember reading a comment by a New York University professor that went something to the effect that while dissatisfaction may be uncomfortable, the real disasters in life occur when we get what we want. He was referring to some of the larger goals of society, but the same thing often applies to us as persons. When we stop striving toward something new, something we find worthwhile and interesting, we begin to die. It's believed that's why teachers, scientists, writers, philosophers, farmers, and others who constantly have something new to look forward to tend to live such long, healthy lives. The teacher has a new class every year. The scientist is always working on a new, tough problem. The writer has a new book or article to do. The philosopher is forever uncovering new, interesting information, fresh ideas. And the farmer has the renewal of new crops and animals about him, a new season to work toward. Many others fit into the same category. Those who do not tend to live shorter lives. With no new place to go, they simply stop sooner. A generalization, of course, but it tends to work out. Incidentally, heart attacks, contrary to popular opinion, are not common among leaders in business and industry, in government and education. The leaders usually enjoy excellent health and have learned to live in balance. It's the people in the levels below the top who permit themselves to be skimmed off years before their time. It's been said that a heart attack is nature's way of telling us to slow down or change our habits, or both. It's a rude lesson, often fatal, but that's nature's way. How did Huxley put it? He compared living to playing a game of chess with an invisible opponent who's always strictly fair and just, but who never overlooks a mistake. If we play ill, he said, we are checkmated, without haste, but without remorse. And to those who play well, they're rewarded with the overflowing generosity with which the strong delight in strength. Living in balance, in anything, is the way to play the game well. How did James Allen put it? A calm, strong life is like a shade-giving tree in a thirsty land, a sheltering rock in a storm. You know, it's only when we're calm and at peace with ourselves that the good ideas tend to come. I think that's why we so often get our best ideas early in the morning or while doing something that's totally routine, such as shaving, showering, driving the car, or walking alone. Most people do not do much creative thinking, you know. In fact, they've been put down so many times as youngsters they've learned to distrust their own ideas, doubt their own ability to get worthwhile ideas. Our mind, and no one knows what the mind is, incidentally, or even where it is. The ancient Greeks thought for a while it was located in the liver. Our mind comes as standard equipment at birth. But since the demands put upon it are relatively small and it's not required to come up with new ideas, it soon falls into disuse. As with anything else, what we don't use, we tend to lose. And so it's easy to forget or never learn that we own free and clear the most amazing agency ever to appear on Earth, the human mind, all of it, whatever it is, subconscious and conscious, seeming to draw as it does on the mysterious stuff of the universe, past and present. You know, there's a system for creative thinking. Perhaps you're familiar with it. First, you define the problem. Put it on paper. Quite often, just defining it leads to a solution. The next step is to begin gathering data with regard to the idea. We need to find out all we can about the possible ways in which such an idea might be solved. We need to read about it, talk to people who've had similar problems, find out all we can about it. Next, we need to write down possible solutions. Think about possible solutions. Turn the problem every way but loose. Worry it like a puppy with a slipper. If it has to do with a product, can it be made larger, smaller, a different shape or color, simpler? You know, it's generally believed that in order to produce a product of excellent quality, it must cost more. The old dichotomy still hangs on the idea that if something is inexpensive, it must not be of the highest quality. Well, that's ridiculous. It can be inexpensive and still be of excellent quality. Think in terms of simplification. Can the superfluous be taken away? Sometimes a superior product must cost more because of the quality of its components and manufacture, but not necessarily. Since World War II, we've seen some excellent products turned out at very reasonable cost. After you've thought about it until you begin to dream about it and talk to yourself about it, then forget it. Let it slip down into the great cooker of your subconscious mind, where the archetypes of your racial memory and your genetic wizardry and 10 million ancestors can all work on it and hold it up against 1,000 solutions. The mind is like a supercomputer. It'll work on a problem while we're doing other things. Let it cook as long as it needs to, and then, one bright morning, if you're like I am, it'll usually wake you up at about 4 in the morning. The answer will pop into your mind as clear and simple and perfect as anything you ever saw in your life. You then yell Eureka, leap out of bed, and write the answer down on a piece of paper as fast as you can. If you don't, the idea can slip away as quietly and mysteriously as it came, and you can spend the next 20 years trying to recall it. The next step is to put the solution to work and stay with it to completion. Don't try to play it too safe. Nobody ever got to second base trying to keep one foot on first. Either you have confidence in your ideas or you don't. Getting good ideas is only about 10% of the job. The 90% is the follow-through. The person who will follow a good idea through to completion is one of the most valuable people in our society. Every problem is an opportunity. Our opportunities are an exact ratio to our problems. We have great national problems. Therefore, we have correspondingly great national opportunities. The bigger the problem, the better the opportunity. Problem, pollution. Great industries employing many hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people will be built upon the problems of air, land, noise, and water pollution. Problem, population. Population means people, and whether you're serving their growing needs or helping them to hold their numbers in check, you've got opportunities. Millions are already being earned in these problem areas. There seem to be two main classifications of people in the world, the big group, which is made up of those who are part of the problem, and the small group made up of those who are part of the answer. Which group we choose to be in is up to us. A professor at MIT has said, The changes taking place in the world today are not merely changes from one form of society, one form of technology to another. They're so wide-sweeping that they're taking us from one major epoch of human history into another. We are in an order of change which is completely different from anything our ancestors knew, unless we go back 10,000 years when they invented property, ownership, work, and mechanics based on the wheel. Change. Unprecedented, amazing change, and you and I are right in the middle of it. For some, change represents a threat to the status quo. For others, it represents unprecedented opportunity. For me, and I hope for you, change always represents new opportunities for growth, development, for the setting of new goals, for the moving on to new vistas, for the fresh breath of renewal. We don't know much about anything really, but most of the top people in the disciplines touching on human conduct seem to be certain of two major points. One, the average healthy person functions at a fraction of his true capacity, and two, that the most exciting lifelong adventure is bringing more of our real powers to bear in our lives. What would it be like to be a fully mature, self-actualizing, fully functioning human being? This is the ideal, busy, happy person with all his faculties smoothly functioning in perfect cooperation. No wars going on inside, no hang-ups, no neuroses. The ideal productive person. The late Dr. Maslow made a study of self-actualized people, and they stack up this way. First, these superior people have the ability to see life clearly, to see it as it is rather than as they wish it to be. They are less emotional and more objective about their observations. They're far above average in their ability to judge people correctly and to see through the phony or the fake. Usually their choice of marriage partners is far better than average, although by no means perfect. These self-actualized people are more accurate in their prediction of future events. They see more fully, and their judgment extends to an understanding of art, music, politics, and philosophy. Yet they have a kind of humility, the ability to listen carefully to others, to admit they don't know everything, and that others can teach them. This concept can be described as a childlike simplicity and lack of arrogance. Children have this ability to hear without preconception or early judgment. As the child looks out upon the world with wide, uncritical, innocent eyes, simply noting or observing what is the case, without either arguing the matter or demanding that it be otherwise, so does the self-actualizing person look upon human nature in himself and in others. Without exception, Maslow found self-actualizing people to be dedicated to some work, task, duty, or vocation which they considered important. Because they were interested in this work, they worked hard, and yet the usual distinction between work and play became blurred. For them, work is exciting and pleasurable. Maslow found creativity to be a universal characteristic of all the self-actualizing people he studied. Creativeness was almost synonymous with the terms healthy, self-actualizing, and fully human. Now here again, the creativity of these people is similar to that of little children before they learn to fear the ridicule of others. Maslow believes this to be a characteristic which is too frequently lost as we grow older. Self-actualizing people either do not lose this fresh, naive approach, or if they lose it, they recover it later in life. Spontaneity is typical of this person. Self-actualizing people are less inhibited, therefore more expressive, natural, and simple, and of course, they have courage. The courage that's needed in the lonely moments of creation. This is a kind of daring, going out in front all alone, a defiance, a challenge. Thus, while these persons are humble in that they're open to new ideas, they're willing to forego popularity to stand up for a new idea. The self-actualizing person is a hard worker. Inspirations are a dime a dozen. The difference between the inspiration and the finished product, for example, Tolstoy's War and Peace, is an awful lot of hard work. To go on, the self-actualizing person has a low degree of self-conflict. He's not at war with himself. His personality is integrated. This gives him more energy for productive purposes. As Maslow puts it, truth, goodness, and beauty are in the average person in our culture only fairly well correlated with each other, and in the neurotic person even less so. It is only in the evolved and mature human being, in the self-actualizing, fully functioning person, that they're so highly correlated that for all practical purposes they may be said to fuse into a unity. The psychologically healthy person is both selfish and unselfish, and in fact these two attitudes merge into one. The healthy person finds happiness in helping others. Thus for him, unselfishness is selfish. They get selfish pleasure from the pleasures of other people, which is a way of being unselfish. Or saying it another way, the healthy person is selfish in a healthy way, a way which is beneficial to him and to society too. Research indicates that the healthy person is most integrated when facing a great creative challenge, some worthwhile goal, or a time of serious threat or emergency. The mature person has a healthy respect for himself, a respect based upon knowledge that he is competent and adequate, and, while not dependent upon it, frequently receives deserved respect from others. Such a person does not need or value unwanted fame or notoriety. He's in control of himself and his destiny. He's not afraid of himself, ashamed of himself, or discouraged by his mistakes. He makes mistakes, but takes them in stride. The psychologically healthy person is highly independent, yet enjoys people. He's free. He resists the dictates of culture when it does not agree with his point of view. The average person is motivated by deficiencies. He seeks to fulfill his basic needs for safety, belongingness, love, respect, and self-esteem. The healthy person is motivated by a desire for self-actualization or growth. A man has a hierarchy of needs. As one is satisfied, a new one pops up. The needs start with the purely physiological: food, liquid, shelter, sex, sleep, and oxygen, not necessarily in that order. For the man who's extremely and dangerously hungry, Dr. Maslow said, no other interests exist but food. He dreams food, he remembers food, he thinks about food, he emotes only about food, he perceives only food, and he wants only food. But what happens to man's desires when there's plenty of bread, and when his belly is full? At once, other and higher needs emerge, and these, rather than physiological hungers, dominate the organism. And when these in turn are satisfied, again new and still higher needs emerge, and so on. Maslow contends that throughout his life the human being is practically always desiring something. He is a wanting animal, and rarely reaches a state of complete satisfaction except for very short periods of time. As one desire is satisfied, another pops up to take its place. Once the physiological needs are fairly well satisfied, safety needs arise. Now, since the safety needs are generally fairly well satisfied in the healthy, normal adult, they can be best understood by observing children or neurotic adults. Child psychologists and teachers have found that children need a predictable world. A child prefers consistency, fairness, and a certain amount of routine. When these elements are absent, he becomes anxious and insecure. Freedom within limits, rather than total permissiveness, is preferred. In fact, is necessary to develop well-adjusted children, according to Dr. Maslow. Insecure or neurotic adults behave much like insecure children. Such a person, says Maslow, behaves as if a great catastrophe were always almost impending. He's usually responding as if to an emergency. That is to say, a neurotic adult may be said to behave as if he were actually afraid of a spanking. The insecure person has a compulsive need for order and stability and goes to great lengths to avoid the strange and the unexpected. The healthy person also seeks order and stability, but it is not the life or death necessity that it is for the neurotic. The mature person also has an interest in the new and the mysterious. When the physiological and safety needs are met, needs for love, affection, and belongingness emerge. The person now strives for a place in his group, and he'll strive with great intensity to achieve this goal. It suddenly becomes more important than anything else in the world, and the person may even forget that once when he was hungry, he sneered at love as unreal or unnecessary or unimportant. Love in the sense of being deeply understood and deeply accepted, Carl Rogers' definition. Following this is the need for personal development and the utilization of one's potential. On and on the needs of humankind go. The need for identification, the need to understand the unknown, the need to transcend whatever has been accomplished in the past. They're never-ending. In trying to understand what motivates people, it's important to remember that once a need has been gratified, it has little effect on motivation, at least for a while. As Dr. Maslow has said, a want that is satisfied is no longer a want. As long as we want things and are motivated toward their achievement, we are alive, interested, motivated. If we run out of wants or lose all hope, an unhealthy situation develops. Dr. Maslow talks of clinical experience with cases in which previously healthy adults suffered boredom, loss of interest in life, depression, and self-dislike. Such symptoms, when they appear in apparently intelligent people, are often brought about when, in Maslow's words, people are leading stupid lives in stupid jobs. I've seen many women, Maslow goes on, intelligent, prosperous, and unoccupied, slowly develop these symptoms of intellectual inanimation. Those who followed the recommendation to immerse themselves in something worthy of them showed improvement or cure often enough to impress me with the reality of the cognitive needs. One of the major problems of the growing adult, the adult who aspires toward fulfillment and self-actualization, is the choosing of new meaningful goals as his former goals are accomplished, and, being accomplished, no longer motivate him. It's important that we do not stop along the line and sit down for too long. To remain healthy and alive, a person needs a new interest, a new challenge as he satisfies the old ones. If a person aspires to a certain level in the business world, a certain income, and reaches it, and if it's quite adequate for his needs, it won't motivate him for very long. Something new must be introduced. If the man doesn't find it, then management should, if the man is to continue to grow and make a major contribution to the organization and to himself. Motivating people is as important for the people as it is for the vitality of the organization, whether the organization is a family unit, a school class, a research organization, or a business concern. Some people are self-motivating. We all know such people. They're always off on some interesting new endeavor, but I'm afraid a large percentage are not. They seem to lack the curiosity or the creativeness or the knowledge to seek out new motivating challenges for themselves. Our lives are full of things, our pasts full of events that were once the most exciting things that buoyed us up to great heights of expectation and filled our lives with fresh new interests. Today, well, they're old hat, like the 3-year-old car or the 10-year-old home. They no longer suffice to motivate us. And what's the busy wife and mother to do when the last of her kids marries and moves away, or when her husband retires from his job of 30 or 40 years? We must consciously see to it that we do not run out of wants, that we can still sit down and make out a want list and find ourselves getting that old excitement again for something new to plan and work for. The human being needs desperately that carrot on the stick. Dr. Maslow said to his students, if you deliberately plan to be less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be unhappy for the rest of your lives. You'll be evading your own capacities, your own possibilities. Henry James, the very prolific American novelist, brother of William James, who is often called the father of American psychology. In fact, the James family remained outstanding for generations. Henry James once wrote in The Ambassadors, live all you can. It's a mistake not to. It doesn't so much matter what you do in particular, so long as you've had your life. If you haven't had that, what have you had? What one loses, make no mistake about that. The right time is any time that one is still so lucky as to have. Live. Well, that wouldn't be a bad piece of advice to have framed and placed in a conspicuous place, would it? Live all you can. It's a mistake not to. But it seems that relatively few people are aware of living, as they take so many important things for granted. They wake up, go about their days, go back to sleep without once having thought, I am alive, and I'm sensing this day. It is only when life begins to reach its conclusion that people become aware of the importance of living. It's like those people who have to be sick to appreciate good health, or deprived of their freedom in order to realize its value. People who are aware of living, of enjoying living, are like sponges. They soak up all that goes on around them. They're aware of other people, of what's being said. They're observers of their environment. Their eyes are everywhere. I played golf once with a man who often stood with his eyes squinted, staring for long moments at the trees or a particularly pleasant view. I asked him about it. He said, now look at that grove of trees over there and squint your eyes. Look at the rich black shadows underneath them. And then he said, black is the mother of all color. It was a curious thing. And so I stood and squinted my eyes, and sure enough, the sight appeared as a painting, and the shadows did deepen. Everyone else on the golf course was simply playing golf. This man was acutely aware of everything going about him as well. He was living more than we were. He was getting more out of his life than we were. As Henry James said, the right time is any time that one is still so lucky as to have. The right time is while we're working, or driving, or with our loved ones, or alone. The right time is the only time we've got, which is now. And if we haven't learned to live now, We'll always be living on the hope that perhaps the future will be somehow better. Now is the future we were thinking about last year, and if you don't make it into tomorrow, will you have enjoyed? Will you have been aware of today? Well, it's worth thinking about. Anything that can make life more interesting, more vivid, is worth giving some thought to. Older people are always saying to younger people, you don't realize how lucky you are, which I suppose means that they didn't either. Robert Jones Burdett wrote, there are 2 days in the week about which and upon which I never worry. 2 carefree days kept sacredly free from fear and apprehension. One of these days is yesterday, and the other day I do not worry about is tomorrow. It isn't the experience of today that drives men mad. It's the remorse for something that happened yesterday and the dread of what tomorrow may disclose. That's good, isn't it? It reminded me of a line in Matthew in the New English Bible in which Jesus is quoted as saying, so do not be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow will look after itself. Each day has troubles enough of its own. If a person could take Robert Burdett's advice to heart, if he could keep those 2 important days free from fear and apprehension, if he could never be remorseful about yesterday or concerned about tomorrow, it would do a lot more than lift a great load from his mind. It would cause him to concentrate on the only time we have, which is right now. If we handle today properly, we need take no thought about tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, we can handle it as best as we can, and it'll take care of the day after. This is not to say that we should not set goals for ourselves. I think we should, most definitely. But once we know what our goals are, we can quit worrying and set ourselves to today's task in the calm assurance and expectation that we'll reach the goals we've set in good time. Living is like building a house with bricks. You can set only 1 brick at a time. You can live only 1 day at a time. We all know this. Understanding it is not difficult, but doing it is something else again. We need, I think, some kind of reminder every morning, perhaps at many times during the day, until we can form the habit of living in which someone called daytime compartments. This is a panic-proof way to live, because we can almost always handle the events of today. It's the imagined disasters of tomorrow or next week or next year that tend to wear people down and make negative misfits of them. Moreover, by living today and doing the best we can with today, we won't have remorse tomorrow. We'll tend to be satisfied with what we're doing, even as we strive to improve. Each of us has 1,000 times approached a period of his life with fear and apprehension, only to find the problem solved one way or another on the appointed day. Perhaps we were not always happy with the solution, but the problem was met, resolved, and we moved on by it. If we had not worried about it, we would have spared ourselves many unnecessary hours of fear and upset. We need only do the best we can to handle the problems of today, and in so doing prepare ourselves for the tomorrow we hope will make its appearance. Burdett's quote, there are 2 days in the week about which and upon which I never worry. 2 carefree days, kept sacredly free from fear and apprehension. One of these days is yesterday, and the other is tomorrow. I was chatting with a West Coast psychologist and management consultant the other day. He's also an author of some note, and he happened to mention that he's conducted classes in prosperity. That is, he's tried to teach poor people how to become well-to-do and prosperous. How well he succeeded at that, I have no way of knowing, but I have little doubt that the subject can be taught. There are thousands of books on how I made $1 million in the stock market, or in raising chickens, or in real estate, or in mail order. It isn't so much the kind of business chosen, or the line of work. It's possible to become prosperous in any line. It isn't what you do that's so important. It's more a matter, at least in the beginning, of our attitude. As the late Ernest Holmes once put it, prosperity just doesn't happen. It's at first a state of mind. Do you remember that famous comment of Mike Todd's? He said, being broke is a temporary situation. Being poor is a state of mind. Surveys have indicated that most people equate happiness with enough money to live well. Other surveys have proved that people who are well-to-do are generally happier than poor people. That makes sense. They have fewer worries. But you run into a great deal of skepticism when you tell poor people that prosperity depends more on the state of mind than on anything else. Few other objects are surrounded by as many myths, misinformation, and old wives' tales as is the subject of how to become prosperous. And my friend the psychologist told me that a series of questions can usually determine whether or not a person is going to make his mark financially. One is to ask the person how much money he intends to be worth by the time he's reached a certain age. This is followed by a question which asks, how much money do you wish you could be worth by the same age? If the two figures are the same, if the person being questioned intends to be worth the same amount he would wish to be worth, chances are he'll make it. He's serious about it, and he has the attitude that says, I will, not I hope I will. As Ernest Holmes put it, are you interested in making money and running your business successfully and getting a better salary? Of course you are. You want to be prosperous, and this is only right and sensible. The plain, practical, everyday problem of money-making is a definite part of living. The answer to it is summed up in these words. Prosperity awaits man's recognition and acceptance of it. Or it can be stated another way. Your financial success already exists, but it's waiting for you to see it and accept it as your own. Just decide on what is prosperity for you, and then head out, get busy, and it's usually a good idea to start where you are. There's possibly more opportunity lurking within your present environment than you can imagine. Once you create the proper mental attitude, the ideas you need will be attracted to you. They'll come right out of your own subconscious. Then if your attitude is still right, you'll act upon your ideas. But it all starts with the right attitude. As scientists delve deeper into the nature of what causes things to be as they are, they find themselves immersed in an unseen world of infinite intelligence, acting in a lawful and purposeful manner. What we encounter in the physical world appears to be but a manifestation of invisible cause. The distinguished psychologist and incidentally the inventor of the famous lie detector, William Moulton Marston, wrote, For years, as a psychologist, I've sought in the careers of great and everyday people the inner springs that make for successful living. There are two which seem to me of prime importance. The first is plain old hard work, governed by cool, logical thoughtfulness. The other is sudden, warm, impulsive action. Admitting that I can't name a single person of true accomplishment who hasn't forged success out of brains and hard work, I still hazard the sweeping assertion that most of the high spots and many of the lesser successes in their careers stem from impulses promptly turned into action. Most of us actually stifle enough good impulses during the course of a day to change the current of our lives. These inner flashes of impulse light up the mind for an instant, then, contented in their afterglow, we lapse back into routine, feeling vaguely that sometime we might do something about it, or that at least our intentions were good. In this we sin against the inner self, for impulses set up the lines of communication between the subconscious mind and daily action. Said William James, every time a resolve or fine glow of feeling evaporates without bearing fruit, it's worse than a chance lost. It works to hinder future emotions from taking the normal path of discharge. Thus we fail to build up the power to act in a firm and prompt and definite way upon the principal emergencies of life. Well, Dr. Marston wrote, once in Hollywood, where Walter B. Pitkin and I were retained by a motion picture studio, a young promoter presented an ambitious production idea to us. Well, the plan appealed to both of us. It was, I thought, distinctly worth considering. We could think it over, discuss it, and decide later what to do. But even while I was fumbling with the idea, Pitkin abruptly reached for the phone and began dictating a telegram to a Wall Street man he knew. It presented the idea in the enthusiasm of the moment. It carried conviction. To my amazement, a $10 million underwriting of the picture project came as a result of that telegram. Had we delayed to talk it over, we might have cautiously talked ourselves out of the whole idea. But Pitkin knew how to act on the spur of the moment. He had learned to trust his impulses. Behind many an imposing executive desk sits a man who is there because he learned the same lesson. The person who follows his impulses is not necessarily flighty, far from it. The timid soul, however, is fearful lest impulse lead him into all manner of mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. We're bound to make them, no matter which course we take. Some of the worst mistakes in history have followed consciously reasoned decisions. The mistakes of inaction, flanked by heavy reasoning, are likely to be worse than the mistakes of genuine impulse. The life stories of successful people are full of episodes that have marked turning points in their careers. True impulses are intelligent. They reveal the basic interests of the unconscious mind. In the winter of 1969, Stanford University printed an article by Dr. Willis W. Harmon, which I found to be of tremendous interest. Dr. Harmon suggests that when future historians look back on our times, it will not be the wars, riots, student protests, or even our technological and scientific advances they'll remember. He suggests that it will be something quite different from any of these, an event perhaps well symbolized by an obscure scientific conference held in Council Grove, Kansas in April of 1969. He further suggests that the consequences may be even more far-reaching than those which emerged from the Copernican, Darwinian, and Freudian revolutions. It has to do with transpersonal psychology, that field of inquiry which deals with man's subjective experience, especially the transcendental kind. Early writing in this field were F.W. H. Myers' Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death, Richard Buck's Cosmic Consciousness, William James' Varieties of Religious Experience, and Patiram Sorokin's The Ways and Power of Love. This new age we're moving into, Dr. Shapley of Harvard calls it the psychozoic age, is based on several propositions, the most important of which is that the potentialities of the individual human being are far greater in extent and diversity than we ordinarily imagine them to be, and far greater than currently in vogue models of man would lead us to think possible. Another is that a far greater portion of significant human experience than we ordinarily feel or assume to be so is comprised of unconscious processes. Now, this includes not only the sort of repressed memories and messages familiar to us through psychotherapy, it includes also the wisdom of the body and those mysterious realms of experience we refer to with such words as intuition and creativity. Access to these unconscious processes is apparently facilitated by a wide variety of factors, including attention, free association, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, special drugs, and others. Now, included in these partly or largely unconscious processes are self-expectations, internalized expectations of others, images of the self, and limitations of the self, and images of the future, which play a predominant role in limiting or enhancing actualization of one's capacities. These tend to be self-fulfilling. Much recent research has focused on the role of self-expectations and expectations of others in affecting performance, and on the improvement of performance level through enhancing self-image. The validity of the self-fulfilling prophecy and the self-realizing image appears to grow steadily in confirmation. That April 1969 Council Grove, Kansas conference on voluntary control of inner states, co-sponsored by the Menninger Foundation and the American Association for Humanistic Psychology, represented an unprecedented assemblage of scientists working with altered states of consciousness. Now, what we're seeing is the scientific stamp of approval and deepening interest in what the ancient prophets told us we could do. We're beginning to find a new image of man. We will begin the cultivation of an enhanced self-image in each individual child. Perhaps now at last men will begin to truly discover who he is and what his true powers are. Sometime back, my old friend Dr. Herbert Otto wrote an article in the Saturday Review in which he pointed out how greatly we underestimate our true potentialities, and he explained why so many millions tend to withdraw from the world. It's because we are members of a pathology-oriented culture. Psychological and psychiatric jargon dealing with emotional dysfunction and mental illness has become the parlance of the man in the street. In addition, from early childhood in our educational system, we learn largely by our mistakes, by having them pointed out to us repeatedly. And all this results in early negative conditioning and influences our attitudes and perception of ourselves and other people. An attitudinal climate has become established which is continually fed and reinforced. As a part of this negative conditioning, there is the heavy emphasis by communications media on violence in television programs and motion pictures. The current American news format of radio, television, and newspapers, the widely prevalent idea of what constitutes news, results from a narrow, brutalizing concept 30 or 40 years behind the times, and is inimical to the development of human potential. The news media give much time and prominent space to violence and consistently underplay good news. This gives the consumer the impression that important things that happen are various types of destructive activities. Consistent and repeated emphasis on bad news not only creates anxiety and tension, but instills the belief that there's little except violence and disasters and accidents and mayhem abroad in the world. As a consequence, The consumer of such news gradually experiences a shift in his outlook about the world, leading to the formation of feelings of alienation and separation. The world is increasingly perceived as a threat, as the viewer becomes anxious that violence and mayhem may be perpetrated on him from somewhere out of the strange and unpredictable environment in which he lives. There slowly grows a conviction that it's safer to withdraw from such a world, to isolate himself from its struggles, and to let others make the decisions and become involved. As a result of the steady diet of violence in the media, an even more fundamental and insidious erosion in man's self-system takes place. The erosion affects what Dr. Otto calls the trust factor. If we've been given a certain amount of affection, love, and understanding in our formative years, we're able to place a certain amount of trust in our fellow man. Trust is one of the most important elements in today's society, although we tend to minimize its importance. We basically trust people. Now, the consistent emphasis in the news on criminal violence, burglarizing, and assault makes slow but pervasive inroads into our reservoir of trust, as we hear and read about the acts of violence and injury man perpetrates upon one another, year after year, with so little emphasis placed on the loving, caring, and humanitarian acts of man, we begin to trust our fellow man less, and we thereby diminish ourselves. By undermining our trust, we become estranged from each other. Existing in a setting that provides as consistent inputs multiple irritants, ugliness and violence, and lack of close, meaningful relationships, man is in danger of becoming increasingly irritated, ugly, and violent. Maybe you saw the news item some time back about a Canadian farmer who sold his Stradivarius violin for, I think it was in the neighborhood of $60,000. He sold it to the same New York City dealer he had bought it from many years before. The dealer paid him more for it than he'd paid. That's because the violin has appreciated in value over the years and because of the shrinking buying power of the dollar. But the farmer sold his precious violin by the world's most famous violin craftsman because, as he put it, "I'm getting old and I have no children to leave it to." By getting it back in the hands of the dealer, he knew that it would wind up in the hands of someone who would treasure it as he had, and he could use the cash. Antonio Stradivari, the Italian violin maker, lived from 1644 to 1737. That's 93 years at a time when the average life expectancy was around 30, and there's a story there. He worked alone, although later in his life his sons helped him. No committee advised him. No one made decisions for him. His tools were primitive, but that was not important. He put himself into his work. All the world's tools couldn't make up for that. When he was finished with an instrument, when he was sure that his work measured up to his own personal standards, he signed his name to it. And still today, more than 200 years later, his name is a household word all over the world. Ask anybody if he's ever heard of Stradivarius, which is the Latin pronunciation of the name. Throughout history, there have been many men with similar standards of excellence. Authors such as William Shakespeare, artists like Leonardo da Vinci, craftsmen like furniture maker Thomas Chippendale, and silversmith Paul Revere. Everything they did was done well, not because it had to be, but because they wanted it to be. They had only to please themselves, yet the products of their fertile minds and skillful hands are still collected and admired today. Now, what is it that causes one person to take pride in what he does, while others give little or no thought to the quality of their work? Do you know? Of course, when we were talking about Stradivari or Da Vinci, we were talking about great geniuses, towering talents who found their media and became great in them. There have been many other fine violin makers and artists who took just as much pride and care in their work but lacked the same quality of talent. There are even today many thousands of craftsmen who will not turn out shoddy work, who would be glad to sign their names to their work. But I think you'll admit that they're in the minority. Perhaps they've always been in the minority. But the respect for quality never changes. It still commands the highest price. It is still revered wherever we find it. And the person performing it has gained for himself two precious assets. One, he's built the kind of security that lasts a lifetime. He need never worry about his income. And two, his work is a source of satisfaction and joy to him. He derives deep satisfaction from being an uncommon person. There are people who set their own high standards to which they make themselves measure up. They're quite happy to put their names on their work, and their work will stand the test of time.